Uh, I believe Chantal, I'm hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
What do I do here?
There, Chantal.
Hey there. Good
Hey,
morning, BBC, and all the wonderful veterans today. Happy Veterans Day. And if we have anyone from Canada, happy Remembrance Day as well. We're excited to be a part of this. And we have Miss Jenny Connor, who is actually our lead for one of our ERGs. And the title or the name of that ERG is VETSNet. So I'll let her talk maybe a little bit about that, and let's kick off. But again, congratulations. Thank you for serving, everyone. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all that you do for everyone. Thank you.
thank you, Chantal. Jenny, you're going to be leading us this hour.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Sean. I'm really glad to be here. So I'm in charge of our VETSNet employee resource group at FedEx Ground. And so I'm not actually a veteran. I'm someone who's just really passionate about veterans and just providing resources, providing a place of community for them within FedEx. My brother is serving in the military. My grandfathers both served. And so I'm just really passionate. I've had some cousins as well. I just really am passionate about all that you do and providing that space for you. So this hour, we've got a couple of different veterans who are going to be able to share their stories, and we're just going to do some question and answers, let them share, and that's kind of what it's going to look like. We're going to start off first with Andrew. He was the VETSNet lead and actually got a promotion, and so passed it off to me, and really excited to have him. He's a P&D manager in Midland, Texas. Is that right, Andrew?
I am. Yeah. Wow. How do I follow up, Mr. Riker? That was some great storytelling. Yes, I was the lead a couple years ago when VetsNet, I did the VBC call for Veterans Day. I passed it on to Jenny, and now I'm a co-lead. My time is very consumed with this new location.
Yeah, and something Andrew won't say is that he really took, I think VetsNet had kind of stalled out a little bit, and he took it and really revamped it within FedEx to provide that space. So we were really grateful for all the work that he did. I was just able to kind of take on what he did and kind of move forward in that way. So Andrew, what branch of the military did you serve in, and what was kind of your job there?
So yeah, I was in the Army. I did just short of 9 years. I was a staff sergeant, and I was a Patriot missile defense operator maintainer. 14 Tango series.
All right. So in that time, how long did you serve?
So I did 8 years, 9 months, 2 months short of my 9 years.
All right. So maybe tell us about maybe some of your experiences or something that really stood out to you while you were serving in that time.
Yeah, so I got to travel a lot. In my time I spent 7 years overseas. I've been to Qatar. I did 3 years in Japan, South Korea a year. I got to go to some missions in Amsterdam. I was at Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Bliss, Texas, and of course Fort Sill, where I got my training from. It was probably the best experience I could have asked for. I came from a military background. My father and brother both are Marines, but it was apparent that the Marine Corps was more than I would have expected. They were always, very, as we say in the Army, cool. Devil dogs, they're a different breed of military. And I kind of wanted to carve my own path. And that's what led me to join the Army. I had troubles as a kid and in my teens and early 20s with drugs and other things, getting involved, alcohol. And one day, I got stopped by a cop, and luckily nothing came of it. But the next day I walked into a recruiter's office and completely changed my life. 10 years, just short of, with the military, best decision I made. I got married, have a couple kids, and now I live, probably the best life I could have lived. If I hadn't made that decision, I'd probably either be in jail or dead. So the military really is something that I'm passionate about. It does save a lot of lives. I've seen it firsthand with some of my friends that are from other much more dissident areas of the country, and it just puts perspective into your mind as you progressively move up.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Do you have a funny story that you experienced in the military or something that stands out to you, or maybe someone special that you met that really stands out as well?
Yeah, so I met a lot of great people in it. I've worked with unique characters. I remember being a part of a group that, while I did not go and attend, they went and attended air assault school. The week they got back, they decided to practice air assault out of a third floor window at Fort Bliss, which was very much frowned upon, but they still wanted to show off what they learned, utilizing their skills. And it didn't end well for them, but it was still great to see for me. I got to interact with Japanese soldiers, being involved with the Patriot missiles. There's a lot of branches and countries that use the missile system. So I've worked with, in Korea, they have special operations group tankers. So I've worked with groups over there on unique missions. And then, of course, our special forces. I got to do some unique trips with them as force com and as just people, soldiers they needed on the other side, doing guard shifts and stuff just to help them get trained up.
May
So,
I
yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, we have to go back to this air assault story because there's a lot that you left on the table there. Number one, I'm not a veteran. So what is air assault and why? And the only thing I'm imagining is these guys jumped out of a third story window.
Yeah, so air assault is, a lot of times they're utilized to repel. They're repel masters usually. There's more to it. Air assault does involve, people that do groundwork, but a lot of times it's rappelling down buildings, rappelling down mountains, or out of helicopters. I know there's more to it, as I'm not air assault. I can't tell you anything. If anybody's on here, I'm sure you can tell us more. But the moment they graduated school, that was their, they partied that night. That, the school was very stressful from what I hear, but it was probably one of the funniest things to see was just a bunch of grown men making a decision to climb out the third story window, utilizing they utilized a fire hose because the buildings we had, they had fire hoses on the third floor, which caused a lot of issues, a lot of upset people afterwards. Their careers didn't survive, but it was still
They
funny
were
to
all
see.
court-martialed?
Essentially, yeah.
Wow.
UCMJ. So they made a decision, but still, as you look at it now, while it's not great for their career, but still it was a unique experience, especially when there's alcohol involved.
Reminds me of when I was a teenager and my friends were like, we're going to go to Walmart and stir some trouble. And I said, I think I'll pass.
Yeah.
Jenny, go
It
ahead.
was
Sorry, I needed to hear more of what was going on with that story.
No,
no,
you're
it
good.
was
I'm glad you
unique.
asked for clarification. Yeah, so with your time in the military, Andrew, and transitioning out of it, how was that transition? And then maybe, how does FedEx fit into all that as well?
So, it's different now compared to a lot of people who had a different transition. So FedEx, or the Army, which is the branch I was in, and a lot of branches are working towards giving veterans a better transition. What I learned was you have to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to hold your hand and walk you through it. They're going to give you the tools, they're going to give you the notes, but ultimately you have to do it yourself. For me, I started 2 years prior to my transition. I knew I was done. I was hurt. I'd fallen a few times that caused me injuries, and it just I was finding myself in the back. So I started my transition, and then I got stationed in Korea, and Korea for me was a 1 year tour without my family, or it would have been a 3 year tour if I took my family. And knowing I wanted to get out, I took the 1 year, and that's where I transitioned out of. I utilized every resource available to me. I contacted the FedEx because they were a part at the time. They're hiring freeze now, but at the time they were doing internships, so I could go work for them for a 4 month period and then come out with a career. Uh, we were training as ops managers, which are the management team that's responsible for people that load trucks to get them out for delivery. So I utilized that resource. I made contact. I came on my Christmas break and I flew all the way back to the States, and I started engaging. I started contacting and making those phone calls. Once I got back to Korea, that's when the email started. I started making sure I was engaging, asking for, what I can do to get in. And then when I finally got accepted into their program, I had to fly back to the States, do the program. And that was at the height of COVID. So when I flew back for my transition, COVID had just blown up. It was taking everybody out. Nobody was working, but FedEx is a priority company, so we were still delivering packages. We were still moving packages. Can't think of the word I want to say. Or transporting. We were transporting packages. We were loading them out. There were a lot of companies that were closed. So I came in and no knowledge of the processes and procedures, but the Army prepared me for being able to jump into a situation and just take control. And that's what I did. I was an intern, but they had a lot of management team that were sick. They gave me a basic rundown of what needed to happen, and they gave me one spot, and I slowly, progressively took 3 additional spots over the 4-month period. Once I was done, they didn't have a position for me. Everybody had come back. And that's when they told me that a different position that I hadn't been training for, hadn't thought about, had opened up. I applied for it, and they managed to get me in because I proved to them that I could take on any role necessary. And that's what the Army and the military provide us. They do provide us that ability to just take control and very much adapt and overcome. You give us a book or a pamphlet or show us one time, and we're likely to exceed your wildest imaginations on what we can do. I've been with FedEx now 4 years. I'm very much fast tracking. I did my job, and now I've taken over. I'm the second, essentially a second in command for a complete facility.
Jenny, I may need to unmute you if you've muted. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I had to cough and I was like, oh no, I can't unmute myself. Yeah, so thank you so much, Andrew. Do you have anything else you would want to share just about your experiences or your time with us? We are very grateful, and we love having you with FedEx and just all the good work that you're doing there as well.
No, I just like to say thank you, everybody. I mean, all of the veterans here involved and all of the supporters. It's important. You know, I've had a lot of friends who have decided to take their lives in their own way because they didn't have a support system, or they didn't know how they can communicate. So knowing that I'm able to be out there, you know, I go out and I talk with a lot of people about how I can help them. A lot of times it's, you know, hidden pains, things you can't see. So it's all about being open and being able to communicate. I've got a few veterans in my station who knowingly, you know, they can walk into my office, say, I just need to talk. You got a few minutes, and I'll shut the door, stop everything I'm doing to give them that time. But I check in on them as well. I've got friends all across the country and the world who still to this day will ask me questions. I've got some active duty people who I'm still very close with, and they're not happy with the way the military is changing, but I'll talk to them in a way that'll make them feel that they're appreciated. And, you know, it's not, you know, the military was the greatest thing I ever did, but it's not the end. Once you get out, you got to keep pushing through. So I want to say thank you to everybody who supports the military and veterans alike.
May I jump in, Jenny?
Yes.
I don't want to let you off the hook too quickly, Andrew. As I see, I think we had 4 people scheduled for this hour. We may only have 2 on the line right now. So I'm going to dive in a bit, Andrew, if you don't mind.
Feel free.
Sure. Awesome. So you had mentioned, I always like to find out why someone enlisted. You mentioned that you were just sort of like going down a bad path. So you found, you said Army. Was it you who made that conscious decision, or did someone help push you towards that?
So my father was a Marine. He was a 14-year Marine. He was still active at the time. And my brother was a Marine as well. That he followed suit a few years after. Our stepfather is a little younger than most, so he was only about 5 years older than us. So my mom, you know, she got a young one. So seeing that and seeing what he was able to provide us, I, you know, was dealing with a lot. I thought drugs were the best way. And I was doing a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing, but I didn't know that at the time. You know, I knew right from wrong, but, you know, I was trying to prove myself. It's absolutely beautiful, babe. Give me one moment, okay? So I made a decision. You know, the cop pulled me over because I made a illegal U-turn, and I had drugs in my car. He did not suspect, didn't ask questions. But the next day, the drugs were flushed, and I walked into a recruiter's office, and I actually walked into all the recruiter's office. I thought I was going to go to the Coast Guard first because I didn't want to deploy away from here. I wanted to be in the States, and they weren't open. The Marine Corps, they didn't like that I had a GED, so they wouldn't accept me. Air Force, same thing. They want some college. They didn't like my GED. And then the Navy was the same way. But I walked into the Army and they said, well, let's take a test ASVAB and see what you score. And, I scored okay. They said, all right, go ahead and study a little bit, come back the next day. And really, they just wanted me to come back and take me up to MEPS. But they need to make sure I can get up there with what I had. So they gave me the drug test. I didn't have any issue with the drug test. I didn't use. I just sold at the time. So I passed the drug test, no problem. And I was gone within 26 days. So passed everything they needed, got up there, and they said, do you want to fire a missile? And I said, that sounds like fun. I'd never fired a missile. I was the guy that transported the missiles so other people can fire it because officers fire the missiles. But it was the best decision I made. I grew up, my biological father was a felon. So I grew up in the life of seeing people in and out of prison regularly, and looking back on it, I could have easily been there.
Right. I have a 3-year-old as well, or I don't know how your daughter is, but I know the feeling of the pitter patter here. So don't worry about that. That's totally welcome here with BBC.
Yeah, she's 5 and she wants that attention. It's the weekend, so she usually gets it. But
yep.
I always, I got no problem with her being in. She's what I live for.
Absolutely. Totally hear you on that. So if I could take a couple more minutes of your time, I'd love to hear, was it a culture shock to you when you hit basic?
So basic training, again, I should have ended my career there. I had a blast in basic training. I thought it was a camp. I grew up, like I said, in the military, but I did like the Young Marines. So I had this basic, I'd already been trained on these basics, tasks and drills. But I was loud. They always tell you when you go into basic training, if you want to get by with no issues at all, just shut up and keep drawing. I was a very color outside the box. And I remember one day in basic training, my drill sergeant came in sick, and he was up on the platform calling out exercises, and no one could hear him. And I wasn't doing the right exercise, and he challenged me, and I said, not in the same words, but I can't hear you. That did not go well. That was the first time I'd ever gotten an Article 15 for 45 days. And there was other words inside that sentence that earned me that Article 15. But they could have easily said, you know what, you're done here. But it wasn't like that. In basic training, especially now, we're so short staffed that we want to get them broken down, because that's what basic training is: break you down from your bad roots, bad habits, and build you back up so you have better habits. And that's what they did for me. Not the same drill sergeant, but the senior drill sergeant took time while we were on base or on our Article 15 UCMJ time that we were doing our extra duty to actually talk to us and tell us about what we can expect from the military. He took us inside to work out with them and just have adult conversations as a way to mentor and work with us to ensure we don't have the same issues that we had prior to coming in. I got in with a lot of great people, and I also made friends with a lot of not the best people. People make decisions spur of the moments, and many of them, make the right decision. But I have been friends with people that they made the bad choice, and luckily I wasn't with them at the time.
Who would you say was your most important mentor during your basic time? Because coming in, having the background you had, you said, just sort of falling in with sometimes the wrong crowd, who really set you on the right path?
So my neighbor, he was a Navy corpsman who had been shot in the hand. Whenever I had a question, military related or anything, to this day, I can call him up and ask him a question. And he was he retired a few years later, but he'd been disabled. And even in Japan, he got stationed in Japan on a light duty task there with the Navy. And I was in Japan at the same time. We'd meet for lunch every couple weeks. So he really, my dad could have easily been my mentor, but he was dealing with his own demons. So I found someone close who really took me under their wings. In my teens, he taught me how to drive stick shift, which came very handy when I was downrange. in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, because all they do is drive the stick shift bamboo trucks and whatnot.
Mhm.
Without it, I wouldn't know how to drive stick. So I really, and I still to this day call him, ask him questions, and him and I go back and forth to help each other.
Where you had mentioned deployments, where did you deploy to first?
My first deployment was non-combat. It was in Qatar. As a Patriot missile defender, I was always on an Air Force base. The Patriot system defends our planes and our airways. So I was in Qatar on an Air Force base there. I went to Amsterdam on a mission there for a couple months while they were just doing different things there. I did 3 years in Japan. I did Korea, and I did, like I said, Fort Bliss and Fort Hood. But overseas, I did about 6 years overseas.
So talk to me about landing in Qatar for the first time. So this is your first time out of the States?
Yes. Yeah, landing in Qatar, that was my first place. It was interesting. You know, you come off the plane and you grab your bag and your gun, and everybody is shuffling off. You've got, it's secured, so everyone's together. You know, it's not like we're filing out and everyone's going, 5 feet apart. It felt safe. It was, it's kind of hard to say, but it was like a vacation. When I was there, we got to go and tour the country. I got to go deep sea fishing when I was there. So it was definitely a different than what I would have expected a deployment to be. There was alcohol allowed, a couple alcohol drinks a day. So it was not what I would have expected when they said, we're going to go deploy. Make sure you have your weapon ready. Here's your orders. It was, we were protecting things. We stayed live. We changed out live missiles regularly, but it wasn't what I expected when I decided to join. And it changed my perspective a little bit of what the different deployments consist of.
Two more questions for you. One is, as a civilian, I've never been that close to a missile. What was the first time you stepped near one? Did it feel a little intimidating?
It's in a casing, so I don't think I ever felt intimidated by it. What intimidated me was the height of it. Having to climb up on top and having to torque down bolts or take it off with forklifts. That was the intimidating part. Knowing that it was mechanically and electronically managed, there was never really a fear that, oh, this thing's going to go off. Not like my first time throwing a grenade. When I was throwing grenades, that was intimidating. One bad drop and that could have gone off. But I never had a fear with the missiles because of how big they were and all the steps we were taught that goes into setting them off. It's not like somebody could just walk up and go, hey, let me throw an incendiary on here and that missile is going to shoot off. It's going to cause some issues, but it's not going to fire.
I laugh because we've recently, in the last week or two, talked with, for whatever reason, the topic came up of throwing a live grenade the first time. And every single veteran has said, like, that was intimidating the first time you pull that pin and you have to toss that. And it's like you're singularly focused on making sure this goes absolutely perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at the beginning of that experience, you're sitting in the bunkhouse waiting to go, and all you hear is nut to butt. Everybody nut to butt. That was probably, the best thing to hear, at the time. You're like, I'm not gay. You're a basic training soldier, but that's what they told you. Get close. They want everybody sardine tucked in. And then you get out there and, it's very important that they're ready to throw you on the ground. And you see people get thrown on the ground because they don't throw it far enough. But I didn't have that issue. I knew I needed to get it away. It was a baseball in my hand, and I wanted to keep my hands.
Chantal, you said you had a question for Andrew.
I did, Andrew. And as an ex-spouse, veteran, so I too, like Jenny, I've supported in many, many ways. I would like to know, what do you believe was one of the most difficult things for your family as you served? Like, what was something that you told them or you didn't tell them? But what do you believe was one of the hardest moments for them?
Good question.
Your country.
So when I first deployed, I wasn't married. So my mom had already gone through numerous deployments. So she had already dealt with a lot of stress. But even still, I kept her in the dark about what we were over there doing, just because I didn't want her to worry about me, because my dad and brother were both still deploying combat. My dad, while I was deployed, was blown up. He was airlifted back, and to this day still deals with things, and we have conversations about that. My brother had been in gunfights, so my deployment was completely different than theirs, uh, in the sense of danger. That there's still, adrenaline going on and different events that are occurring out there. But my biggest fear was a general walking on my site and getting upset. I can tell you a story about that exactly happening, where you don't expect it, but people fall asleep, they get people killed. And that's exactly what happened at my guard shack. Is the guy fell asleep, a general and a sergeant major walked right past him and walked right into our command post and called, fire, fire, fire. And I had guys running out in their chonies, which are underwears, grabbing their Kevlars, running to run an active drill because they thought it was real. And it's all because one guy fell asleep. And had that been had we been in a different location, that could have been the death of all of us. And it was the death. I mean, I've seen a lot of guys lose their careers because of things like that. But it was definitely the impact of that. So for me, I took a lot of pride in what I did. I had random people that would show up onto our space, and I would challenge them on who they were. So keeping my mom just kind of out of the loop was what I did best, because I knew she didn't need to worry about me. She needed to worry about my family that was back home. I had little brothers and sisters. So I wanted her to worry about them. For me, I knew I was safe. Now, when I got married, that was different. When I had my first kid and I was married, luckily for me, I didn't deploy combat anymore, but still I went overseas to Japan. My wife was there for a few years, but she struggled to deal with depression because she's a Hispanic and has a strong Hispanic background. So she struggled to deal with that separation, even while we were just in Japan, just the three of us. And then when I went to Korea, I went by myself, and it was different there too, because she stayed and I got to communicate with them, but she dealt with it a lot better than I expected. My kids grew up, my daughter really didn't experience what my son did his first 3 years without me. But they adapted well. And now that I'm home, I can definitely see that my wife did a great job and was worried as much as she was, but she sent care package, and that was probably the best thing in my month.
Andrew, thank you very much, because I just remember going through some of that as well. And the coaching that we were getting from the military as spouses was very helpful. But at the end of the day, what was really helpful is having partners, like yourself, and you all encouraging us as allies, spouses, whatever you want to call us, to just, focus on what's at home, that you guys have it. And again, that's why we're so tied to this, just, the overall theme and just everything about Veterans and Remembrance Day. Because at the end of the day, again, while you're handling something major,
I would call Grandpa.
Oh, that's something that I'm sorry, you want to say something? Hi.
She said she wants to call Grandpa.
Oh, tell
She's looking at Mr. Rog there and asking who that is.
Oh, tell Grandpa we said hello when you talk to him. But again, to everyone on the screen, and that's one of the questions I would like to really ask everyone. It's one of the questions I do ask when I do, meet someone that's done something of difficulty. Again, thank you for just always taking care of us by letting us know that you all have it, and that does make it easier. But as someone that's in the dark, it's just really hard. So I was just wanting to get your perspective on what you thought, but that's exactly what some of us were dealing with when you all are away. So thank you, Andrew, for sharing. And Sean and Jenny, I'm sorry. That's one of my favorite questions of, with anyone going through difficulty. So I would like to hear some responses to that as well later with our other participants. But thank you, Andrew, Jenny, Sean.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew. Jenny, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Andrew, appreciate you being a part of this. If you'd like to join us throughout the day, you're welcome to. It was great to hear some of your story. And I believe we have Donnie Wilson also joining us today.
Yes. Yes.
Donnie, I'll
Donnie
ask you
Wilson.
to unmute.
Yeah, Donnie, is that Jay with you?
Yeah, that's Jay. Jay Girls, the one and only.
Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce both of yourselves, and then we'll get started from there.
Okay, my name is Donnie Wilson. I work at 522 in Cedar Rapids. It's a new hub. I'm an ops manager, just like Jay. And I've been working for FedEx for about 4 years. Before that, I was VC for a contracted company for FedEx for about 15 months.
Hello, everybody. Happy Veterans Day. My name is Jay Garrels, and like Donnie said, I work here at 522 here in Cedar Rapids at the hub as well. I've been with FedEx this time around for about a year and a half. And the first time that I worked for FedEx was about 25 years ago. So for about 3 years. And then that was right after I got out of the military.
You're old, man.
Yeah, I feel it. So in any case, it's good to be back and good to be with you guys today. So thank you very much.
Well, we are very glad to have both of you. Before, I know, Donnie, you want to share something that maybe not everyone always talks about, but go ahead and tell us what branch of the military you were in and just how long you served and what your position was.
Okay, I was in the U.S. Army. I was in for 13 years. I started out as a cavalry scout, just like Jay. And then about 6 years into it, I switched over to be a diesel mechanic, thinking I wouldn't get shot at anymore. And definitely didn't work out that way. I've been, like Andrew, I was in Texas a lot. I spent 4 years at Fort Hood. Not a bad place, but at the same time, all you do is go in the field. I was at Fort Sill for training. I've been to, Fort Leonard, Missouri. I was stationed in Augusta, Georgia for about 6 years. Been to a lot of places. I've been to Bosnia, Egypt. I've been to Germany, Kuwait, and Iraq. And that's pretty much my whole career, just bouncing around. As a cavalry scout, I deployed to Iraq for the invasion. That's where I seen most of my combat. And as a cavalry scout, there's a lot of things we do. We do a lot of just frontline missions, kicking indoors, LPOPs, which is observation. A lot of times it's just you and a couple guys or your troop just sitting around. I lived in a small COP, which is a combat outpost. It was literally 14 of us, and we were part of the MITS team where we trained Iraqi army. So we literally lived on a small compound with just us for security. And most of the time we roamed around without any protection on that compound. So most of my career as a cavalry scout was outside the wire at a small combat outpost.
Perfect. So Donnie, do you want to go ahead and share with us what you wanted to share?
Yeah. So I kind of wrote some stuff down mainly to make sure I don't use any cuss words.
We try to keep it PG, bordering on PG-13.
I wanted to write some stuff down though and talk about, I think something that we don't talk about enough. And I'd like to kind of dedicate it to somebody, one of my best friends that committed suicide about 7 years ago. So what I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit more about myself and my struggles as I transitioned out of the military into the civilian world and what it took me to get to where I'm at now. So bear with me here. So I was born in Arkansas. Like Andrew, I was kind of military brat for the first few years. My father was in the Navy. When my parents got divorced, my mother took us back to Arkansas. My whole life, though, I wanted to be in the Army. In fact, I think as I got older, I did it. I talked about it more and more out of spite, just to get under my father's skin, because he was 100% pro Navy. But where I was born in Arkansas, it was in the Ozarks, and a lot of stuff that I did was out in the woods. So a lot of times growing up, I would wander around the woods and pretend like I was an Army Ranger or Delta Force. That was literally all I had. All I wanted. I had a real Army bunk bed. I had a real Army closet, a wall locker in my room. It was that was my life. So on 9/11, I was sitting in my classroom at school, my senior year, and we were watching everything that happened. And a lot of my friends were, when you're young, you don't really take a lot of things serious, even something like that. So a lot of my friends were just kind of making fun of it. I don't know, something just really hit me hard. I grew up very patriotic. My family is very proud of living in the United States, and so am I. So it kind of something burned in me. And a month later, to the date, on October 11th, I joined the U.S. Army, thinking that I wouldn't get deployed. You know, you always think, well, it's not going to happen to me. Well, guess what? After basic training, I went straight to Iraq for the invasion. So that actually happened sooner than I wanted it. Let's see. I did see when I went to Iraq, first we went to Kuwait. We sat there for about 22 days while they were bombing Iraq. Finally, they gave us the orders to go in, and we did. It took us 3 days to go 500 miles on one of the main routes in Iraq, which goes north and south. I could say the first 16 hours is probably the first time we got hit, and probably the next 3 days to 4 was small arms fired and small coordinated attacks. So, so my first few days in country was a lot more action than I expected. Let's see. I was there for 14 months and came back. When we were at Fort Hood, I don't know if I talked about this, but when we were at Fort Hood, they brought the 75th Ranger Battalion, some liaison guys down to train us, which was fun because we were going to support the MIT team. So I got a lot of more detailed training that I guess I would say, I don't know, the Ranger Special Forces. I don't consider that. He says Rangers Special Forces. I don't count that. I think they're overrated. But
right. No offense to any special forces here with us today.
yeah. See, that's the thing about militaries. You can pick on each other.
It's true.
But if somebody else outside the world says something, then we all come at you like rabid dogs or devil dogs. So, so I did that tour. Before I left, I had my first daughter, my first kid. 2 weeks before I left, the doctor induced her just so I could actually see her. I turned 19 the week we landed in Iraq or in Kuwait. When I came home, is when I went through a divorce. You can't, I guess the kind of thing is you can't be in the military unless you have a few divorces or something like that. But I have a couple, so I guess I did my part. Let me get back here. So when I returned back from Iraq, I struggled with a lot of things, and a big thing was connecting with my kids. My relationship with my wife was pretty much gone. She took a lot of it, like Andrew said, it's a stressful thing, and I think that just kind of wore out and put a big distance between us. But when I came home, I struggled with a lot of things: hyper vigilance anywhere I went, paranoia all the time. I couldn't go to restaurants because I couldn't sit at a restaurant unless unless I was facing the front door. I couldn't be in large crowds without sweating or getting real anxious. I would explode a lot, and I just really didn't want to be around people. So I spent a lot of time doing nothing. I would completely keep myself from my family. I would try to stay busy outside of my family without even understanding that I was neglecting them to handle my issues. So just kind of fast forward, I came back. I went back to Iraq in 2007 for another 15 months as a mechanic, thinking I won't see any combat. And they attached me to a combat outpost with cavalry scouts. So for 15 months, I lived in horrible conditions right off the Tigris River. We only had power about 2 hours a day, and that was off the city grid. That was a pretty tough time for me because my ex-wife had got addicted to drugs and took my girls, and there was going a lot of stuff going on there. But my commander wouldn't let me go home because he was worried about what I would do, and I think anybody would worry about that. But I did end up coming home sooner. And when I came home, I was caught, I was found in the living room one night. I had taken Ambien to go to sleep, and I was found in the living room one night. I had been walking around the house with my pistol clearing the rooms like I was in combat. And when my ex-wife came down and caught me, she said it was like I was blacked out. But if anybody's taken Ambien, you can literally sleepwalk on it and not know. I mean, I've called my mother and not even know that I've done it on Ambien. And when that happened, it was finally the time where I just realized I needed to do something. So I went to the VA. I never really paid attention to it, thought I can kind of handle these issues on my own. And when I went to the VA, I struggled for about 7 years, in and out of the military, just trying to find the right doctor. And it was getting tough because every time I went to a new therapist, I had to say the same story over and over and over. And any veteran that goes to the VA or sees a therapist understands that's not fun. It's not fun, and it can deter you from wanting to help yourself. But I stuck with it, and after a long time, they finally got the right medications because the VA likes to throw stuff at you that worked well for me, and I ended up being put in a group for combat vets to learn about coping with grief. So I did that for about 6 more months and graduated, and they gave me all the tools I needed. The thing that was tough is I had a lot of struggles with suicide. Especially the first 3 years when I got back from Iraq while I was still active duty. You do come back, especially if you see a lot of things, you come back with a lot of remorse, a lot of regret, thinking you could have done something different. You really, a lot of times you don't even recall what's going on, like when you're in combat, at least for me, until after it's over with. And then somebody like me, you just analyze it over and over and think, if you would have done this, it would have helped this person, or if you'd done that, this wouldn't have happened. So when I went to that group, they really taught me how to cope with that. And then hearing other veterans that have been in combat who also felt alone and incapable of helping themselves, that really helped, just kind of hearing that from them. So the reason I say all this stuff is, for the longest time, I put using the VA and using what was available to me to the side, thinking I can cope with it and handle it doing, by drinking and, at one time doing drugs, thinking I can handle it on my own, and I couldn't. But when I finally did go through all the program, and I graduated this 6-month program, I think 2 years ago, I started going around and telling all my friends, I'm in a veterans group, just telling them, you should use this. Don't be stubborn. You should use this. There's all these things out there for you for mental health. Even in a world where there's not enough mental health doctors. I try to tell a lot of my friends that, because they try to do the same thing I did. And I don't want them to go through what I did. And I don't want them to deal with what a lot of us veterans and a lot of us people have dealt with. And that's, losing friends to suicide because they can't handle it. So when I got out, I struggled with a lot of that. I had a lot of support though. It actually took my kids, my 2 oldest daughters, to pull me aside in the living room and tell me that they feel like I don't even notice them. And that really changed everything. So now I religiously go to the therapist. I take all the medication as much as I hate it. And I see now that if I would have done all this stuff years ago, I probably would have been a lot further in life as far as my career. My kids would have had a lot less trauma to deal with. I would have had a lot less trauma to deal with. So I say this on Veterans Day: if you're hurting, if you have any mental issues, you don't know what to do. If you work for FedEx, obviously you do have somewhere to call. There's crisis lines you can call for free. But don't let your pride get in the way, because at the end of the day, it's not worth it. You lose. You don't see it then, but in the future, you'll see what you lose. And so I really encourage whoever, if anybody's out there has that problem or any problems like that, use the VA. If you don't feel comfortable with the VA, use something. Don't just let it sit aside. My best friend, Dan Fisher, we served in combat together. He committed suicide 5 years ago because he wasn't sure he was taking medications the VA gave him, a lot of them, and they had it mixed up. He got to the point where he just felt like he didn't belong. He felt like there was no reason for him to be there, that there was no solution, and that because there was no solution, the best fit for him was to end his life. And so he slit his wrist in the shower. The thing with that is, he reached out to me about a week before it happened, and I'd been putting him off because he was always calling me and our friends. He was always junked out, and we got to the point where we just thought we couldn't make a difference. And I didn't do anything. I didn't try at all, and he killed himself. So I'd say, really, please take it serious. It's a struggle that I think any veteran has gone through, especially combat veterans. We know it's a struggle anywhere outside of here, but it's not something to be ignored. That's kind of the message I wanted to send. To me, that's probably one of the most important messages I think we should talk about on Veterans Day. So just to know, Veterans Day is a good day. We recognize it, but it's also, and we appreciate everybody in the community outside, civilians that show that appreciation to us. But it's not always a happy day, and I have to say, working at FedEx has probably been the best thing for me. I've never worked anywhere since I've been out of the Army that gives support to veterans like this. The people I work with has watched me break down and cry on the anniversary of my best friend, and they've always been supportive. And working at a place that's got, the abilities to be a part of, be a lead in VET-A-THON to have things like this is a huge deal. And I think I think more people should do it. And I appreciate this. And I really wanted to just talk about that. And I know I was rambling a lot, but mental health, mental illnesses, especially combat related, I just think are overlooked too much. And I think that veterans sometimes we just got to put our pride to the side. So that's my message.
Donnie, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really.
Yes.
And you weren't definitely, we're not rambling. It's a very important message. It's an important story. Absolutely. And I on our podcast, The Scuttlebutt, I've had conversations with many veterans who, just like you, reached sort of the end of their rope and found some way to claw back into life. Some of them, it was their kids. Some of them, it was, finding a new purpose. And I wonder, in your situation, you said your daughters sort of helped you see that. Was there something else, a part of your life? I mentioned people that do knee boarding, people that, go on long hikes. Like, is there a passion that you've found in your life, your daughters, that has sort of helped you find that, repurpose that in your life?
As far as establishing, you mean reconnecting with my kids, with my daughters?
Or just refinding yourself, finding your new purpose in life?
The one thing that I got back into that my oldest daughter helped me with is I used to do a lot of painting, acrylic on canvas. Actually, at one point I was selling paintings, and my oldest daughter got involved in drawing and stuff like that, which kind of pulled me into getting back into it. And I did actually, when I went to Iraq the second time, I did take a lot of that with me because and draw, like I would do a lot of charcoal drawings of the city of Mosul or whatever. But I would say that's the hobby that she kind of brought me back into. Something I used to really enjoy, and I think just life in general, speeding up as an adult, you just forget,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really the only hobby. We used to do a lot of hunting and fishing, but when I got back from Iraq the second time, I just wasn't at that time I wasn't in a hurry to grab, a weapon and go wander around the woods, so.
Yeah. Is there any way to see the paintings that you do, or the drawings? Do you put them up anywhere?
No. Most of them my mother had, and their house got flooded. My mom and my stepdad travel around the Midwest for the Union because they live in Arkansas, and the house flooded and it ruined the majority of the painting and drawings that I had done.
Heartbreaking.
I do have a few of Iraq, and I should have brought some of those, but most of my stuff is gone.
Can you talk a bit about what you mentioned about how FedEx supports veterans? I think that's a really important, not only just for you have FedEx behind you there on the wall, but it's not something that maybe a lot of us know about, that what FedEx does for the veterans that are a part of its network and a part of its organization.
Well, I would tell you, just having to get somebody that created this business that's a combat veteran, even though I've never met him, is a huge deal to me, because that just tells me that he understands the trials and tribulations that veterans go through, and not that I'm not trying to separate veterans, but even combat veterans, having programs like VET-A-THON, where I met Andrew and Jenny, and they brought me in to be a part of that. That's something that I've never seen at a company, and that's an avenue to build camaraderie within a company, and to combine community members, civilians like Jenny, with military. So VET-A-THON is one thing they help a career help. They have all the opportunities where mental health, you can call, what is it, 8 times you can go visit of your choice for mental health. I mean, they have a lot of stuff that companies don't do. This year, sending out the coins to everybody. I mean, I can't say a time I've ever had that. just the overall appreciation, the patriotism just in our location. I mean, our senior managers and our management, they go out of their way to make us feel important for Veterans Day. Even, and it's little stuff, but it's stuff that you just don't experience at any other place. What?
And Donnie, your senior manager's on the call today, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of kissing up.
So even just that support though, that he did show up today, I think that shows a lot. And
Yep,
I'll explain
absolutely.
a little bit of our EAP. We offer up to 8 free counseling sessions per incident that you're dealing with per calendar year. And whether it's a small incident or something as severe as what Donnie's dealing with, I mean, I've used the services. It's not easy to talk about that you need that, but it's so necessary. And after having used it, that's been really important for me. Donnie, for someone who hasn't gone through what you've gone through, and they want to help, but they don't know how can we show up for you in your life? Like, what's the best way for someone who's struggling with what you're going through?
Be patient. My fiance is probably the most patient person I ever met. And if she wasn't patient, she probably would have kicked me out already, but be patient, Sometimes there's triggers that we have, and when those triggers happen, it's not always like we're cognitively there, and just understand that that's not really that person, and be patient to understand that there's things inside their head they're trying to work out themselves, and having somebody that can kind of guide them, like my therapist is really good about starting me to get talking about a situation, then I'll answer the question on my own, just having somebody that's patient and a listener. I think that's a big deal, at least for me. So.
I do want to thank you, Donnie, just for, I know that it's not an easy mountain to climb, telling your story, but it's so important. And your message rings, I'm sure so true with everyone here, that it is important. It is absolutely important to not only be patient, but, to do something about, what you're struggling with. Don't be shy of it. Don't hide it, get out there and talk, because, it's so needed.
Yep. Absolutely. After I finished that group therapy, I did start to get where I talk about a lot. Like Andrew said, the biggest accomplishment in my life, other than my kids, is serving in the military. I can say that I did something that only 2% of the population did at that time. And I've been around the world and seen things other people could imagine. And I appreciate that, because it gives me a different perspective of life and everything that's going on right now in general. So, and as far as my management team helping or being here to support, I do appreciate that. My senior manager flooded, apparently, from what I was told, everybody's email saying, "Hey, let's support him." So that's just another example, like Jay said, of how FedEx is supporting for veterans within my experience. So
Awesome.
Another one of those suck ups.
It's perfect. Jenny, I want to everybody to give Jenny a round of applause for stepping into the hosting duties here for the hour of a FedEx Hour. I know we have another FedEx Hour coming up later. Jenny, are you back with us then, or?
I will be back with you then.
Oh, so were you voluntold or did you volunteer for hosting duty?
Both.
Both? Excellent.
Chantal and I decided we would try to tag team it if we needed to. So
yeah. Well, it's always fun. It's one of our favorite things about VET-A-THON is that we can hand off the hosting duties. Todd and I, we take, the job very seriously, and we do a very thorough job of making sure that we research all the things that we need to do. But with VET-A-THON, we could just sort of like let go a bit and say, hey, let's let some other hosts out there and fly. Jenny, you did a fantastic job. I just want to give you a good round of applause. Thank you so much for stepping into the hosting duties. And we'll look forward to seeing you again later. I believe the 5 o'clock hour. Is that correct?
4 o'clock maybe?
Might be 4. Yep, 4 o'clock hour. I was looking at it wrong. 4 o'clock hour.
Okay, good. I was like, oh no, I told everybody 4 o'clock, so I was really hoping it was 4.
4 o'clock hour. You're right. I'm gonna take over the mic here real quick so we can sort of give everybody our good station break until our next hour. Let me go ahead and share